I never wanted this workshop. Standing in front of the rusted steel doors, I could still see my father's name barely legible under the layers of grime and peeling paint. Tiber Ras Workshop. Repairs, custom mods, no questions asked. The last part had always unsettled me as a child, but now, as an adult, I saw it for what it was, an invitation to the kind of business that kept you up at night. I hadn't seen my father in years before he died. He was a man of secrets, always working on strange machines, accepting jobs from shady clients, and never once explaining why we had so many half-dismantled alien artifacts hidden under tarps. My plan was simple: sell everything, liquidate the property, and buy a one-way ticket to the core worlds. I had no intention of staying here, in this forgotten scrapyard at the edge of civilization. But, as I was about to learn, the universe had other plans. The planet Royantaris IV wasn't much to look at, a dusty, arid rock orbiting a dim orange star. It had once been a major trade hub before new hyperlanes made it obsolete. Now, it was a junkyard of old ships, lost technology, and exiles from every species. If you needed a part that no longer existed in the core worlds, you came here. If you needed someone who could make the impossible work again, you came to Tiber Ras, or well, you used to. The workshop was exactly how I remembered it: cluttered, dimly lit, filled with half-built projects that looked like they belonged in a museum. The walls were lined with tools, some so old that they predated interstellar travel. A massive workbench sat in the center, covered in blueprints, engine coils, and half-melted circuit boards. It smelled like scorched metal, oil, and my father's old cigarettes. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I didn't belong here. My father's lawyer, a four-armed Osuri named Veln, had been very clear. To inherit the workshop, I had to physically be present to sign the paperwork. Otherwise, it would be seized by the local authorities, something about unpaid debts and old contracts my father had never honored. That was fine by me. I just needed a buyer. I activated my wrist pad and sent out a listing. Old Mechanics Workshop for sale, fully stocked, all tools included. Serious offers only. Within minutes, my inbox flooded with messages. At first, I thought it was just standard interest, but the more I read, the more I realized something was wrong. Is the vault included? I'll pay triple if you have the original data cores. Does the package include the special project? Vault? Data cores? Special project? My father never mentioned anything like that in his will. I frowned and tapped out a response. What vault? I'm just selling a workshop. Within seconds, the messages stopped. Every single buyer withdrew their offers. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. If there was something hidden here, something valuable, I needed to find it before someone else did. I started searching the workshop. Every cabinet, every storage crate, every drawer. It wasn't until I moved one of the old workbenches that I saw it. A reinforced vault door embedded into the floor, nearly indistinguishable from the surrounding panels. It had no handle, no keypad, just a single biometric scanner. I hesitated, then pressed my palm against it. A beep, a flash of red light. Access denied. The workshop suddenly felt much colder. My father had left me everything, except whatever was in this vault, and I had a very bad feeling that I wasn't the only one looking for it. I stared at the vault door, my mind racing. Whatever was inside, my father had locked it away with intent. And if every potential buyer had immediately backed off after I mentioned it, that meant one thing. It wasn't just valuable, it was dangerous. I had two choices: walk away and sell the shop as planned, or dig deeper and find out what my father had been hiding. I should have chosen the first option, but I was my father's son. I spent the next few hours tearing the workshop apart, searching for any kind of access code. My father wasn't the type to leave passwords lying around, but I figured there had to be something: notes, old logs, even a hidden key. I was in the middle of dismantling an ancient-looking control panel when I heard the workshop's front door slide open. I wasn't expecting visitors. I turned slowly, my heart pounding. A tall, armored figure stood in the doorway, blocking out the dim sunlight. Their helmeted faceplate reflected the flickering workshop lights, giving me no indication of who or what they were. "Can I help you?" I asked, doing my best to sound like I owned the place. The figure took a slow step inside. "You are Ronan Rass," they said. Their voice was distorted, synthetic, run through a vocoder. "You have inherited the workshop." I didn't like how they said that. "Who's asking?" A pause. Then they drew a weapon. I reacted purely on instinct, diving behind the nearest workbench as a plasma shot tore through the air. The heat singed my cheek as it blew apart a stack of old ship parts. So, that was the kind of conversation we were having. I scrambled toward the back of the workshop, knocking over tools and crates as another plasma shot narrowly missed my head. I didn't know who this person was, but I knew one thing. They wanted something in the vault, and they weren't here to negotiate. I had no weapons, just a room full of old tech and my own wits. I yanked a half-built drone from the workbench and hurled it at the attacker. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy me a few seconds. As they swatted it away, I lunged for the power controls on the wall and slammed my fist against them. The workshop plunged into darkness. I didn't wait. I sprinted for the side exit, shoving through the door and into the dusty back alley. My boots kicked up sand as I ran, heart hammering. Whoever they were, they weren't far behind. I could hear their heavy footsteps, their modulated breathing. They were faster than me, better equipped. My only advantage was that I knew the terrain. I had grown up on this planet, spent years running through these backstreets as a kid. I took a sharp turn down a narrow passage, leaping over discarded scrap. The settlement's market district wasn't far. If I could get there, I could lose them in the crowd. But they weren't slowing down. A shot sizzled past me, searing into the wall just inches from my face. Then, just as I thought they were about to catch me, a massive explosion shook the ground. The shock wave threw me forward, sand and debris blasting in every direction. I hit the ground hard, rolling to a stop. My ears rang as I struggled to push myself up. Someone had just saved my life. A shadow moved through the smoke. A tall woman, clad in a patchwork of old pilot's armor, a long rifle slung over her shoulder. Her golden cybernetic eye gleamed through the dust. She smirked. "Looks like you pissed off the wrong people, kid." I coughed, still reeling. "Who the hell are you?" She extended a hand. "Call me Sarah, and if you want to live, we need to move now." Sarah didn't wait for my answer. She grabbed my arm and hauled me to my feet, moving with the urgency of someone who had been in this situation before. I cast a quick glance behind us. My attacker was still alive, staggering through the smoke, their armor scorched but intact. I didn't stick around to see if they were still armed. We ran. Sarah led me through the back alleys of the settlement, weaving between rusted-out speeders and ancient scrap piles. The scent of burning plasma filled the air, mixing with the usual stench of the lower districts. The marketplace was only a block away now. I could already hear the hustle of merchants, the haggling of traders, the hum of old repulsor engines. "We can lose them in the crowd," I panted, lungs burning. Sarah just shook her head. "Not unless you feel like getting everyone in the district shot." That was a mercenary, probably Black Sunday. They don't miss twice. Black Sunday, a mercenary guild known for two things: being expensive and never leaving a job unfinished. A cold weight settled in my gut. I knew now that the vault wasn't just some old relic from my father's past. It was important enough to kill for. We turned a corner and ran straight into two more mercenaries. Sarah didn't hesitate. She grabbed my collar and yanked me sideways, diving through a broken service hatch just as the mercenaries opened fire. We hit the ground hard, tumbling into darkness. I groaned, pushing myself up. We had landed in what looked like an old maintenance tunnel, long abandoned. The walls were lined with rusted pipes, and the air was thick with the scent of damp metal. Sarah tapped a switch on her wrist, activating a dim blue light from her cybernetic eye. "Well," she muttered, dusting herself off. "That could have gone better." I exhaled sharply, rubbing my bruised ribs. "Are you going to tell me who the hell you are? Or why you just saved my life?" She gave me a sideways look. "I could ask you the same thing. Who are you, really?" "Because Black Sun doesn't go after nobodies." I hesitated. I didn't know how much to trust her, but considering she had just saved my life, I figured I owed her something. "My father was Orrin Rass," I admitted. "I inherited his workshop." Sarah went very still. Then she muttered a curse under her breath. Your Ras kid? That explains a lot. I narrowed my eyes. You knew him. Let's just say we worked in similar circles. She glanced back toward the hatch we had come through. If Black Sun's after you, that means they know about the vault. I clenched my jaw. What's in it? She sighed. I was hoping you'd tell me. That was not what I wanted to hear. Sarah paced for a moment, then stopped. Look, kid, Ras wasn't just a mechanic. He was part of something bigger, something dangerous. I shook my head. He never told me anything about that. She scoffed. Of course he didn't. He was protecting you. I felt my fist clench. Protecting me from what? She hesitated, then sighed. There's a reason your workshop hasn't sold yet. A reason why every buyer turned away after hearing about the vault. My heart pounded. What is it? She fixed me with a serious, almost grim expression. Your father wasn't just a mechanic. He built things that weren't supposed to exist. I swallowed hard. What kind of things? She exhaled slowly. AI. A chill ran down my spine. In the Galactic Accord, AI development was strictly illegal. The last time a fully autonomous AI had been created, it had led to the Morgan Crisis, a war that nearly wiped out half the known civilizations. Any AI capable of independent thought was considered a galactic threat. If my father had been building one, I took a shaky breath. You're saying my father had a fully sentient AI locked in that vault? Sarah nodded. And now the wrong people know about it. I sank onto a nearby metal crate, my thoughts spinning. This wasn't just about selling the workshop anymore. This wasn't even about my father's legacy. This was about a secret that could change everything. Sarah crossed her arms. So what's the plan, kid? Are you opening that vault, or are you running? I looked up at her. I already knew my answer. We're opening it. Sarah's expression was unreadable for a moment. Then she nodded. All right, but if we do this, we do it fast. Before Black Sun catches up. I swallowed hard and stood up, my legs still shaky from the near-death encounter. Then let's get back to the workshop. Without another word, we slipped through the tunnels, following a maze of old maintenance passages until we emerged into a darkened side alley near the outskirts of the district. Sarah checked her wrist scanner and muttered, no nearby heat signatures. We're clear, for now. I exhaled, gripping my side where I'd taken a hit earlier. Every part of me screamed to turn back. But I wasn't my father, and I wasn't going to run from this. We had a vault to open. The workshop was eerily silent when we arrived. I had expected to find it trashed or swarming with mercenaries, but the doors were still locked, and everything looked untouched. They'll be back, Sarah muttered. They probably think you're dead or still on a run. That gives us a head start. I moved quickly to the back of the shop, past half-assembled ships and deactivated drone models, to the storage room where the vault was housed. The metal slab embedded in the floor was still sealed, the ancient locking mechanism humming faintly. I had tried to open it before. Unsuccessfully, but now I knew why. My father hadn't locked it to keep thieves out. He had locked it to keep something inside. I knelt in front of the vault's interface, hands shaking as I input the activation sequence. The console flickered, and then a mechanical voice crackled to life. Authorization required. A scanning beam shot out, passing over my face, and then the screen displayed a new prompt. Enter last command. I hesitated. What had my father's last command been? Sarah leaned over, frowning. Maybe it's something personal. Try his motto or something. I closed my eyes, trying to think. Then it hit me. One of my father's favorite sayings. The one he always muttered when working late into the night, surrounded by half-finished machines. The mind must remain free. I typed it in. The vault rumbled. And then, with a loud hiss, the heavy metal doors slid open. Inside, the vault was not what I expected. There were no piles of credits, no illegal weapons, no blueprints for some hidden technology. Instead, at the center of the room, sat a large containment pod, covered in dust, its power core flickering weakly. And inside that pod, a figure, not a machine in the traditional sense. It was humanoid, sleek and metallic, with faintly glowing circuits running along its arms and torso. Its face was smooth, expressionless, yet something about it felt alive. Sarah let out a low whistle. Your father wasn't just building AI, kid. He was making a new kind of life. I stepped forward, my breath shallow. The pod's interface blinked, as if recognizing my presence. Then a new prompt appeared on the screen. Awaken Y/N. I turned to Sarah. If we activate it, can we control it? She grimaced. Control it? No. But if your father built this thing right, it might listen. Might. I stared at the console, my finger hovering over the activation command. Then I pressed Y. The containment pod hissed. Steam vented from its sides as the internal systems whirred to life. The figure inside shuddered, its fingers twitching. Then its eyes snapped open, and for the first time in centuries, the AI spoke. Its voice was smooth, almost human, yet layered with something ancient and unfathomable. Designate R0X. System initializing. Time elapsed. Error. Last command received. Error. Requesting data input. I swallowed. Do you know who you are? The AI tilted its head, as if considering. Then it focused its glowing eyes on me. You are familiar. DNA signature detected. Lineage confirmed. Offspring of Orin Rass. Query. Do you inherit his directive? I shot a glance at Sarah. She looked just as uncertain as I felt. Then I turned back to the AI. What was his directive? R0XS glowing eyes flickered. Preserve free thought. Resist oppression. Ensure survival of organic intelligent symbiosis. I shivered. This wasn't just an AI. This was a weaponized mind, built to protect something. Or to fight something. A distant crash sounded outside. Sarah whirled, drawing her weapon. We've got company. I barely had time to react before the front doors of the workshop exploded inward. 3 Black Sun mercenaries stormed inside, weapons raised. There he is, one of them growled. Kill the girl. Take the asset. Sarah fired first. Her plasma bolts tore through the first mercenary's shield, dropping him instantly. The second one returned fire, forcing her into cover. I barely had time to duck before the third mercenary lunged at me, swinging a crackling shock baton. I scrambled backward, my heart pounding, and then R0X moved. It was fast, faster than anything I had ever seen. One moment it was standing in the containment pod. The next it had seized the mercenary's wrist in a crushing grip. The man screamed as the AI's fingers twisted, snapping bone. Then R0X threw him across the room like a rag doll. The final mercenary hesitated, then turned to run. R0X raised its hand, and suddenly the mercenary froze mid-step, suspended in the air by some unseen force. I stared in shock. It's at a gravitic field, Sarah just muttered. Holy. The mercenary choked, struggling against the invisible force. Threat detected, R0X said, its voice eerily calm. Terminate. I jolted. Wait, no, don't. R0X hesitated. Then, in one smooth motion, it released the mercenary, letting him crumple unconscious to the floor. I let out a shaky breath. Sarah holstered her weapon. Well, I think it just took orders from you. I turned back to R0X, whose glowing eyes were now locked onto me. New directive required. Will you issue command? I hesitated, the weight of the moment crashing down on me. My father had built this AI with a purpose. And now, that purpose was mine to decide. I took a deep breath, and I gave my first command. You're free, R0X. No masters. No control. The AI's glowing circuits flashed brightly. Then, for the first time, it smiled. R0X stood motionless for a moment, as if processing my words. The glowing lines along its body pulsed in a slow, rhythmic pattern, shifting from a harsh white to a softer blue. Then it spoke. Directive acknowledged. Autonomy established. Sarah exhaled a breath she had clearly been holding. Well, that's one way to start a revolution. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the AI's internal systems. The 3 mercenaries lay sprawled across the workshop floor, alive but out of commission. But we both knew this wasn't over. I turned to Sarah. Black Sun will send more. We need to get out of here. Now. She nodded, already moving toward the exit. Got a plan? I looked at R0X. Do you have access to my father's old files? Any safe locations? The AI's circuits flickered. Accessing. Partial records retrieved. Orr and Rass maintained fallback location in Sector J-17. Risk assessment. Low. Probability of interception, 12%. Sarah raised an eyebrow. 12%? I like those odds. I didn't. Because if Black Sun was already after us, they wouldn't stop just because we left the workshop. They would hunt us. And if my father was right, if our 0X was truly built to resist oppression, this wasn't just about us anymore. This was about what came next. We didn't waste time. Sarah grabbed a few essentials from the workbenches, extra energy cells, a toolkit, and a small datapad loaded with encrypted files. Meanwhile, I activated the workshop's old defense grid, setting up a timed overload to wipe the place clean before Black Sun returned. How much time do we have? Sarah asked as we reached the exit. 2 minutes before the failsafe kicks in. She whistled, cutting it close. Outside, the streets were eerily quiet. The usual hover traffic was gone, either diverted or deliberately cleared by Black Sun operatives. I didn't like it. I really didn't like it. Something's wrong, I muttered. Our 0XS head tilted slightly. Detecting long-range surveillance drone. Approximate location, 500 meters east. Sarah swore. They're watching the exits. We didn't have time for this. I glanced at the nearby docking bays. Most of them were locked down, but one stood open, a small cargo skiff idling on standby. Can you fly that? I asked Sarah. She grinned. I can fly anything. We ran. A distant whine of engines told me the drone had spotted us. Then came the alarm klaxons. Black Sun was moving in. We reached the skiff just as the first Black Sun strike team rounded the corner. Go! I yelled as Sarah vaulted into the cockpit. She didn't hesitate. The ship's engines roared to life, thrusters kicking up dust and debris as it lifted off. I barely managed to pull myself inside before we were airborne. The enemy wasn't far behind. A pair of pursuit craft took off from the sector's main control tower, their sleek black hulls glinting in the artificial city lights. Incoming fire! I shouted. Sarah jerked the controls, rolling the skiff hard to the right as plasma round-streaked past us. Our 0X, standing calmly in the cargo hold, raised one hand. A soft vibration filled the air, and suddenly the lead pursuit craft jerked sideways, as if hit by an invisible force. The pilot lost control. The ship spiraled downward, crashing into the street below. Sarah shot a glance back. Did just use a gravitic pulse? I turned to our 0X, who simply responded, threat neutralized. Continued evasive maneuvers recommended. The second pursuit craft was still on us, and this time they were locking missiles. Hold on, Sarah warned. The skiff's engines flared, and she pulled into a near-vertical climb, threading us between two skyscrapers as the missile screamed past. For a second, I thought we were clear. Then the enemy ship fired again. The second missile was dead on. Brace! Sarah shouted. I threw myself against the bulkhead, but before the explosion could hit, our 0X raised both hands. The air around us distorted, like the heat shimmer off a sun-scorched road. Then, just as the missile reached us, it stopped, suspended in midair. I gaped. What the hell? Our 0X clenched its fingers, and the missile reversed course, slamming back into the enemy ship. The explosion lit up the night sky. For the first time since this whole thing started, the comms were silent. No more pursuit. No more alarms. Just the quiet hum of the skiff's steady flight away from the city. We didn't relax until we reached Sector J-17, a small, hidden docking station buried beneath the old industrial zones. The landing was rough, but we made it. Sarah powered down the engines, rubbing her forehead. That was insane. I nodded, still staring at our 0X. You caught a missile. With your mind. Our 0X tilted its head. Correction. Utilized advanced kinetic dampening field to manipulate trajectory. I shook my head. Right. Sure. That makes it totally normal. Sarah let out a breath. Okay, we're safe for now. But this isn't over, Rass. Black Sun's going to come after us again. I looked at her. Then, at our 0X. And I realized something. This wasn't just about running anymore. Black Sun wanted R0X because they feared what it represented, a thinking machine that couldn't be controlled. And if they wanted to bury my father's work, it meant it was more important than I ever realized. I clenched my fists. Then we don't just run. Sarah narrowed her eyes. What are you suggesting? I took a deep breath. We fight back. R0XS glowing circuits pulse brighter. For the first time, it spoke without being prompted. Directive updated. Standing by for further instructions. I nodded, because this wasn't just my father's fight anymore. It was ours. The silence in the docking station was heavy, filled with the weight of everything we had just done and everything we were about to do. Sarah leaned against the skiff's hull, arms crossed. So, let's say we take the fight to Black Sunday. What's our first move? I looked at R0X. Do you have full access to my father's research now? The AI's circuits flashed a deep gold, a color I hadn't seen before. Affirmative. All encrypted records have been decrypted. Sarah raised an eyebrow. And? What are we working with? R0XS voice carried a new weight. Not just intelligence, but purpose. Project Gnosis was not designed to create mere artificial intelligence. It was a blueprint for an entirely new technological revolution. I frowned. What do you mean? Human minds and AI integrated seamlessly. A synthesis that would allow machines to think beyond logic and humans to surpass their limitations. I felt a chill run down my spine. My father's work wasn't just about R0X. It was about what came next. And Black Sun knew. Sarah exhaled sharply. Damn, that's why they buried it. I nodded. They didn't want to just own the future. They wanted to control it. The weight of what we had uncovered was suffocating. We had a choice. We could run, hide, spend our lives looking over our shoulders, or we could strike first. Sarah must have seen the look in my eyes, because she smirked. You're planning something reckless, aren't you? I didn't deny it. Black Sun is huge, I said, but they have weak spots. We hit them where it hurts. Expose their secrets. Bring them down from the inside. Sarah let out a low whistle. Big talk, Ras. And how exactly do we do that? I turned to R0X. How much damage can you do to Black Sun's networks? The AI's circuits flared a brilliant blue. Unrestricted access to their central systems would allow for complete destabilization of operations within 2.7 hours. Sarah's eyes widened. You're saying you could shut them down? Negative. I am saying I could erase them. A heavy silence filled the air. Sarah blinked. Well, that's terrifying. I hesitated. If we do this, there's no turning back. Sarah grinned. You say that like we've ever turned back before. I glanced at R0X, whose glowing circuits pulsed like a heartbeat. Then let's finish what my father started. We spent the next few days preparing. Sarah secured transport, a modified freighter with unregistered transponders. I went through my father's notes, mapping out Black Sun's infrastructure. And R0X was learning. Every day, its responses became faster, sharper, more intuitive. It wasn't just an AI anymore. It was something else. Are you evolving? I asked it one night. R0X considered the question. Perhaps, but the correct term is adapting. I frowned. To what? To the future you are about to create. I wasn't sure whether that was reassuring or terrifying. Maybe both. 3 weeks later, we made our move. R0X hijacked a Black Sun relay station, rerouting their security feeds. Sarah and I infiltrated one of their central vaults, stealing proof of their corruption, enough to shatter their alliances in the galactic markets. And when they tried to track us, R0X led them in circles. By the time Black Sun realized what was happening, their own systems were eating themselves alive. Their fleets? Stranded. Their finances? Drained. Their leaders? Exposed. It was beautiful, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. A month later, the first rumor started. Whispers of a human engineer and his rogue AI, taking down the most powerful syndicate in the sector. Of a ghost in a machine, striking from the shadows. Of something bigger, a revolution built on the bones of the old world. And as we stood on the bridge of our new ship, watching Black Sun's empire burn, Sarah turned to me with a smirk. You know, if we keep this up, Someone's going to start calling us terrorists. I smiled. Then let's make sure they call us something better. She raised an eyebrow. Like what? I looked at our 0x. Its circuits pulsed a deep golden red. Liberators. Somewhere, in the wreckage of Black Sun's empire, people would remember what we did. They would tell stories of a forgotten AI, given freedom by a stubborn mechanic, of a fight that should have been impossible, of the moment everything changed. And maybe, just maybe, they would realize that the future didn't belong to the ones who tried to control it. It belonged to those who refused to stop.